They said I was dramatic, too sensitive, too emotional. But when your own blood stabs you in the back and smiles while twisting the knife, tell me, how should a woman react? I gave Erin everything, my love, my trust, half of the company we built together. But she wanted more. And on the night of our biggest triumph, she got it by cutting me out completely. No explanation, no warning, just silence. So I vanished, but not in defeat. I disappeared into the shadows where I rebuilt my war chest, one asset at a time. And when I came back, I didn't knock. I kicked the door down. The chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 tiny suns above the ballroom, each crystal prism catching light and flinging it across the gold leaf walls. Claire Whitmore adjusted the strap of her navy silk gown and exhaled slowly. The event was supposed to be a celebration. Her mother's 70th birthday, and the closing of an $80 million content syndication deal that would elevate their media company into a new stratosphere. A decade ago, she would have glided through this room with confidence, champagne flute in hand, Erin on her left, her own name on the lips of every investor. But tonight felt off. She scanned the room for familiar faces and spotted Erin first, of course, draped in ruby red, surrounded by executives and clients, smiling like a woman who had just conquered the world. Claire watched her sister gesture grandly, laughing at something the VP of Strategy had just said. Not once did her eyes search for Claire. Claire moved toward the main display, where the company's journey was being projected in a sleek montage across a floor-to-ceiling LED screen. Founded in 2011 by visionary leader Erin Whitmore, the caption read beneath a photo of their original office, a space Claire had leased using her own savings. The slideshow continued, photo after photo, pitch decks, branding campaigns, global milestones, all attributed to Erin. Not once did Claire's name appear. She blinked, willing herself not to react. Not here, not now. A soft voice beside her broke the silence. Isn't this exciting? It was Vanessa, their brand director. Erin's really pulled it off. Global syndication. This is everything you two dreamed about. Claire turned slowly, keeping her tone neutral. Yes, everything we dreamed about. Vanessa blinked, then looked away. She knew. Of course she knew. Claire walked toward the stage, where a massive backdrop bore the new campaign slogan, One Vision, One Voice. Erin Whitmore Media, her chest tightened. It wasn't a rebrand, it was a rewrite. The MC stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate not only the remarkable milestone of Evelyn Whitmore's 70th birthday, but also the woman behind our company's next great leap, our CEO, our founder, our inspiration, Erin Whitmore. Applause exploded across the room. Claire didn't clap. Erin took the stage, glowing. Thank you, thank you. Tonight is special, not just because we honour my incredible mother, but because we celebrate the future of this company. A company built on bold ideas, tireless work, and unity of vision. Claire stood rooted near the back. Unity, she whispered. I wouldn't be here, Erin continued, without the strong women who came before me, my mother, of course, and the mentors who believed in me. Claire's breath hitched. She wasn't expecting a spotlight, but she'd expected something, a nod, a word, a glance. But Erin looked right through her. As the crowd cheered, Claire took a step back, then another. Her stomach turned. She remembered the late nights, building media decks, cold-calling brands, taking investor meetings while Erin perfected the pitch. She remembered signing the incorporation papers with shaking hands and a silent prayer. She remembered offering Erin the CEO title to avoid public tension. "We'll share power privately," she'd said, and Erin had smiled. Claire stumbled into the hallway, the laughter and music muffled behind thick glass doors. She reached into her clutch and pulled out the printed agenda, flipping through the pages. Her name appeared once, under guest list. That's when she knew. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a rebranding oversight. It was an erasure. Her phone buzzed. A text from a junior assistant she barely knew. "So sorry about the mix-up, Claire. Erin said you'd decided not to be involved in the campaign?" Claire stared at the screen, a dull roar rising in her ears. Behind her, the doors swung open as Erin exited the stage, surrounded by press and PR staff. Claire caught her sister's eye for the first time that night. Erin smiled like nothing was wrong. Claire took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor as she made her way toward the stage. Her heart pounded, not with nervousness, but with something sharper, resolve. If Erin wouldn't acknowledge her, she would speak for herself. This was their company. This was her mother's birthday. She had every right to honour both. As Erin descended the stairs amid a flurry of camera flashes and adoring voices, Claire climbed the other side. She reached the podium just as the final notes of the celebratory music faded out. She glanced at the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and looked out over the crowd. "Good evening," she began, voice steady. "Before the night continues, I wanted to take a moment." Silence. The microphone crackled, then died. She tapped it lightly. Nothing. A ripple moved through the room. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others glanced toward the sound booth. Claire looked stage left, where the AV technician stood with his headset, avoiding her eyes. "I just wanted to say," she projected, her voice rising without amplification. The clatter of silverware and murmurs began to fill the void. Erin stepped forward from the crowd, smile perfectly in place. Her dress shimmered under the stage lights as she moved to Claire's side, gently placing a manicured hand on her sister's arm. The smile didn't reach her eyes. "Claire," she said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. "Why don't you sit this one out? Tonight's already full. Let the next generation handle things." Claire turned to face her, eyes wide. "I'm not trying to—" Erin leaned in closer, her voice now a whisper of silk and steel. "This is bigger than you now. People notice when someone tries too hard to stay relevant." It hit harder than a slap. Claire stepped back from the podium. The ballroom, so vibrant moments ago, had become a stage of spectators. No one intervened. No one questioned. A few averted their eyes. Others watched with veiled curiosity. Her mother sat at the centre table, smiling stiffly under her silver chignon, saying nothing. And beside her, Claire's ex-husband gave a small shrug, as if this wasn't his problem anymore. Not a word. Not a hand raised to stop it. Claire's throat tightened. She walked off the stage slowly, each step echoing louder in her mind than in the room. As she passed by familiar faces, board members, long-time colleagues, family, no one reached out. Not even her mother. She reached the lobby, numb. The large portrait of Evelyn Whitmore hung above the fireplace, regal and cold. Claire stared at it a long moment. The woman in the painting had raised 2 daughters, but only one stood in her spotlight. A waiter passed by and paused. "Would you like me to call you a car, Miss Whitmore?" Claire blinked. "No, I'll walk." Outside, the evening was crisp, autumn wind curling around the edges of her wrap. The noise of celebration behind her faded quickly into the silence of the city night. She walked without knowing where she was going, just away from the lights, the eyes, the betrayal. Somewhere down the block, a cab honked, and a group of younger guests laughed as they spilled out of a side entrance, tipsy and unaware. Claire kept walking. She pulled out her phone, opened the event program once more, and stared at the empty spaces where her name should have been, not forgotten, erased. Erin hadn't just taken the spotlight. She'd taken the whole stage and locked the door behind her. Claire stopped at a quiet corner, the street lamp flickering above. Her breath misted in the air. For a moment she allowed herself to feel the full weight of it. The rejection, the humiliation, the grief. Then she looked up. High above, the windows of the ballroom glowed gold and warm. But that world wasn't hers anymore. She turned and walked into the night. The door clicked shut behind her, and Claire slid the deadbolt into place like sealing a vault. The silence inside her home was thick, untouched by the noise of the world outside. She didn't bother turning on the lights. Her heels echoed faintly against the hardwood as she moved through the foyer, dropping her clutch onto the console table without looking back. She powered off her phone, then her watch, then the tablet in the kitchen. Every screen that connected her to anyone, Erin, the company, their world, went black. The next 2 weeks were a blur. She slept in patches, waking in a cold sweat, her chest tight, her throat dry from unspoken words. She barely ate. Her kitchen, usually stocked with green juices and organic fruit, remained untouched. The espresso machine blinked in the dark, offering routine she couldn't summon. Time didn't move forward. It bled. Emails piled up. She didn't read them. Calls came from unknown numbers. She let them ring. A courier had dropped off a bouquet, congratulatory no doubt. She left it wilting in the hallway. Her body moved, but her mind stayed anchored to the moment she stood on that stage, silenced. That image replayed endlessly. Erin's hand on her arm, that tight smile, the empty eyes. Let the next generation handle things. Claire stared at the ceiling for hours some nights, wondering when exactly her sister had decided she was expendable. When had she become the extra piece in her own story? And then, on the 15th day, something shifted. Claire stood in her closet, still in the same black robe she'd worn for days, and noticed the faintest crack in the armour of grief. It wasn't relief. It was clarity. She walked to the bedroom safe, removed the wall painting with slow precision, and entered the 6-digit code she hadn't used in years. The door released with a soft mechanical hiss. Inside, in the corner, was a slim leather portfolio. She hadn't looked at it since before the company IPO'd. She took it to the dining table and opened it. Tucked within were the original acquisition records, Class C shares purchased under her maiden name, Claire Monroe. A strategy she'd quietly implemented during a round of fundraising 5 years ago, just in case. Her legal mind had insisted on safeguards. Back then, she trusted Erin completely. But Claire Monroe, the lawyer, had always believed in contingency. There it was, 8% ownership, purchased through a holding firm, untraceable to the public. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She felt her fingers tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of waking up, of remembering who she was. By the afternoon, she had changed into jeans and a sweater, brushed her hair for the first time in days, and brewed real coffee. She sat at the breakfast nook, where sunlight cut sharp angles across the table, and opened her laptop. She typed deliberately, muscle memory guiding her fingers. To David Chen, Private Wealth Advisor. Subject, time-sensitive portfolio reallocation. David, I'd like to discuss the movement of certain assets held under Monroe Trust, as well as the reassessment of joint holdings connected to Whitmore Enterprises. Please advise on scheduling a secure call. Urgent. She hit send. Her inbox still had 416 unread messages. She ignored them. Instead, she opened the private financial dashboard for her joint accounts with Erin. Slowly, methodically, she began severing ties. She cancelled the shared credit line linked to their travel expenses. She froze the executive spending account. She revoked Erin's access to the private vault they once used to store critical IP documents. And finally, she initiated a transfer request, moving 1.3 million of unallocated profits into a separate holding under her control. Each click was a reclaiming. Each confirmation screen a declaration, "You don't get to erase me." That evening, Claire reopened her phone and stared at the missed calls. Erin's name wasn't among them. Of course not. Erin assumed she was gone. Claire smiled. Let her believe that, for now. It began with a single email, one line, no signature. "Still watching. I think you should be too." Attached was a scanned image, a redacted clause from a non-disclosure agreement. At first glance, it was gibberish, legal filler, vaguely referencing international holdings. But Claire had written enough NDAs in her life to spot when something was deliberately buried. She leaned closer, rereading the fine print. Something about exploratory negotiation for full acquisition rights pending Q4 valuation. But Whitmore Enterprises didn't negotiate acquisitions. They weren't for sale, not unless... She stared at the image for a long time before typing a reply. "Who are you?" The response came within 10 minutes. "We met once. I believed in you, even when she didn't. I have more. Meet me." Attached was a location, an address downtown, a cafe near the waterfront, discreet but open. She hesitated only briefly before grabbing her coat. The woman sitting at the corner table wore a denim jacket over a graphic tee, far from the polished corporate types Claire was used to. But there was something familiar about her face. Sharp eyes, short hair. She looked up and offered a small nod. "Claire, thanks for coming." "I don't know your name." "Used to be Emily Thomas, Assistant Director of Analytics." She sipped her coffee. "You probably don't remember me. I worked under Erin for 2 years." Claire sat down slowly. "You're the one who left." "I was forced out," Emily corrected. "For flagging discrepancies in licensing reports. Erin said I was disruptive." She pulled a flash drive from her coat pocket and placed it gently on the table. "I saved everything before they cut my access." Claire stared at it. "What am I looking at?" "Internal communications, contracts, email threads. Your sister's been holding meetings with Aurora Media Group. She's preparing to sell Whitmore Enterprises. Quietly. No board approval. She plans to spin the story as a strategic merger." Claire's mouth went dry. "She's accelerated the timeline since you disappeared," Emily added. "Figured you were out of the way." Claire picked up the flash drive, heart pounding. "Why bring this to me?" "Because I know who really built that company," Emily said. "And if you don't stop her, it's gone." That night, Claire sat at her desk, files open across 3 monitors. Emily's data was meticulous. Hidden folder names, scrubbed metadata, embedded signatures buried deep in PDF layers. It wasn't just suspicion, it was proof. By midnight, she was on the phone. "Arthur," she said when the familiar voice answered. "It's Claire Monroe." A pause, then a warm chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. I haven't heard that name in years." "I'm calling about the shares you hold in Whitmore Enterprises. The ones I helped you secure during Series B." He whistled. "You always had the sharpest memory. Why now?" "Because Erin's about to sell the company, and I need the authority to stop her." Another pause. "What are you proposing?" Sell me your 12% stake, quietly. Full market value, plus 10% goodwill. Arthur laughed. That's steep. You know I'm good for it, and I won't let her take what we built. A beat. You know, when I first met you two, I told my wife, Claire's the one with the long game. Erin's just the headline. Claire said nothing. You have a deal, Arthur said. Wire instructions in the morning. Paperwork by Friday. By sunrise, the documents were signed. Claire now held 20% voting stock, enough to summon a special shareholder meeting. And Erin didn't know a thing. There was a time when Claire and Erin were inseparable. In the worn-down yellow house on Ashford Lane, they'd shared a twin bed for nearly a decade. Claire, 4 years older, had always slept closest to the wall, with one arm curled protectively around her little sister. Their parents fought constantly about bills, about missed opportunities, about each other. When the yelling started downstairs, Erin would press her face into Claire's back and whisper, Don't go. Claire never did. She remembered one winter night in particular, when a ceramic plate had shattered against the hallway wall, and their mother had stormed out barefoot into the snow. Erin had cried until she vomited. Claire cleaned it up, tucked her back into bed, and read aloud from a battered copy of Little Women until they both fell asleep. Claire became the buffer, the fixer, the shield, and Erin, wide-eyed and fragile, clung to her like breath. But childhood didn't last. As they grew, so did the space between them. Claire was valedictorian, the girl with the scholarship offers and polished interviews. Erin, though charming and creative, struggled with structure, often brushing against trouble just to feel something. Still, Claire never stopped protecting her. She took the blame for Erin's broken curfew. She covered for missed tests and quietly paid off her first bounce check. It didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like love. It wasn't until college that Claire first sensed the shift. She'd returned home during her junior year to find Erin dating Nathan, a political science major with dishevelled curls and an artist's soul. He was passionate, bright, and magnetic in the way young people often are before life begins to sand them down. Claire didn't mean to like him. But conversations at the dinner table turned into shared books, then walks to the corner cafe, then one unforgettable night when Nathan admitted, quietly, guiltily, that he thought he might have fallen for the wrong sister. Claire shut it down immediately. She packed her things the next morning, returned to school, and never spoke of it again. But Erin had seen them walking together that night. She never asked, she never confronted, but something between them cracked. Claire pretended nothing had changed. She wrote letters, sent birthday gifts, showed up to family events. She invited Erin to move in with her during her first year at the firm. She brought Erin into the company later, made her co-founder, gave her the bigger title, let her shine. She thought generosity would heal what silence had broken, but Erin hadn't wanted charity. She had wanted to matter on her own terms. Claire hadn't seen it, not when Erin reshaped the brand narrative. Not when she slowly edged into press interviews alone. Not even when she pushed for control of the board votes. It wasn't until that night at the gala, when Claire stood on stage and no one turned to listen, that she realised she'd handed Erin the crown, and Erin had melted it down to build a throne for one. Claire sat now in her home office, staring at a photo of them as children. Erin's small arms wrapped around Claire's waist, both girls grinning in the sunlight. The innocence of it burned her chest. She had loved her sister with her whole being. But maybe they had always been writing two different stories, and now the pages were starting to catch fire. Claire hesitated outside the small brick cottage, fingers clenched around the paper bag of pastries she'd brought out of habit. Her mother had always loved the raspberry scones from Vincent's bakery, but Claire wasn't sure if that still mattered. She stood there for a moment, listening to the wind rattle the wind chimes on the porch, then knocked. Evelyn Whitmore opened the door, wearing a cashmere cardigan and a pinched smile. "Well, look who's alive," she said, voice light but not warm. Claire forced a breath. "I thought we should talk." Her mother stepped aside without a word. The living room hadn't changed, still the same overstuffed chairs, the antique clock ticking too loud, the framed family photos, arranged in symmetrical precision on the mantel. Claire noticed one of them missing, her own portrait from the awards gala 2 years ago. Gone. They sat across from each other. Claire placed the pastry bag on the table. Evelyn didn't reach for it. "So," her mother asked, crossing her legs, "are you here to explain your behaviour?" Claire blinked. "My behaviour? You caused a scene at the most important event of Erin's career, walked out like a child denied cake." "I was erased, Mom," Claire said, trying to stay even. "From the company I helped build, from my own sister's mouth, and you said nothing." Evelyn gave a sharp breath through her nose. "You always take everything so personally." Claire stared. "Personally? She stole everything I spent 15 years building, and you stood there." Her mother leaned forward. "Because Erin can handle it. She's strong, she's decisive, she doesn't fall apart when things don't go her way." Claire felt something cold settle in her ribs. "So I'm weak?" "You're sensitive," Evelyn said. "You always have been, always needing reassurance, always trying to please everyone. You led with kindness, Claire, but that's not what survives in business. Erin's a survivor." Claire said nothing for a long moment. Then, softly, "You never really saw me, did you? I saw a girl who wanted to fix things, who always cried when her sister got hurt, who worked herself sick to prove something. And for what? You burned out. You let her take over." "I gave her power," Claire said, voice shaking. "I trusted her." "And that," Evelyn said, "was your mistake." Claire stood slowly, the weight of her mother's words crashing over her like a tide. It wasn't just the betrayal at the gala. It wasn't just Erin's ambition. It was this quiet, lifelong choosing of one daughter over the other. She looked around the room again, every family photo still standing. Erin's graduation, Erin's promotion, Erin's ribbon-cutting ceremony. Claire's wedding photo was gone. Claire's founding award, gone. She met her mother's gaze. "You've always rooted for the loudest one in the room." "I've rooted for the one who doesn't quit," Evelyn said, flatly. "No," Claire whispered. "You rooted for the one who didn't need you." They stared at each other across the chasm. Claire picked up her bag and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she said, voice steadier now. "I'm doing it because I finally remembered who I am." Her mother didn't respond. Claire stepped outside, the afternoon sun warming her face. She was done looking for permission. It was time to take back her life. Not from her sister, not from her mother, but from the shadows she'd hidden in for too long. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of Whitmore Tower hadn't changed. Still encased in floor-to-ceiling glass, still overlooking the city like a throne room carved in steel and shadow. Claire stepped inside 15 minutes early, dressed in tailored black, her hair pulled back into a quiet, commanding knot. The room was empty, for now, but not for long. She laid out her documents with surgical precision, each binder marked, each tab highlighted. At the centre, a slim flash drive waited like a detonator. She checked the chairs. 12 in total, 10 shareholders, plus 2 board advisors. Erin was not invited. At precisely 9 a.m, the door opened. James Rowley walked in first, briefcase in one hand, surprise in the other. "Claire?" She offered a nod. "Mr. Rowley, please take a seat." Others filtered in, long-time investors, junior partners, advisors who hadn't seen Claire since the Series A days. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some greeted her with cautious warmth, others with thin-lipped silence. She let it build. When the final seat was filled, Claire stood. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began. "I've called this special meeting under Section 3.2 of our bylaws, which permits any shareholder with a 15% stake or more to initiate board review proceedings." A collective inhale. One of the newer members leaned forward. "We were told you resigned." "I stepped back," Claire corrected, "but I never relinquished ownership. In fact, as of last week, I acquired an additional 12% of shares from Arthur Daly, bringing my total stake to 20%. Eyes widened. A few glanced toward the empty seat, meant for Erin. Claire continued, voice steady. "I'm here today not as your former COO, not as Erin's sister, but as a co-founder and investor concerned with the survival of this company." She clicked the remote. The main screen lit up with side-by-side comparisons. Official quarterly earnings versus internal memos flagged by Emily's whistleblower files. Red lines connected inconsistencies in export licensing, strategic media rights, and inflated revenue projections. Then she dropped the bomb. These discrepancies align directly with confidential negotiations between Erin Whitmore and Aurora Media Group, a foreign-owned conglomerate seeking to acquire controlling interest in our company. No vote has been held. No filings submitted to the board. Someone swore under his breath. Claire turned to the next slide, an email dated 3 weeks prior, with Erin's name clearly visible in the sender line, confirming intent to proceed under streamlined board compliance. "She's selling the company out from under us," Claire said, "and falsifying reports to ease the transaction." The room erupted into overlapping voices, confusion, disbelief, alarm. James Rowley stood slowly. "You said Arthur sold you his shares?" Claire met his gaze. "Yes, he believed the company deserved better." At that moment, the conference room door opened again. Arthur Daly himself stepped in, grey-haired, calm, a quiet force. He looked around, then at Claire. "I'm late, I know," he said, settling into Erin's empty chair. "But I figured I should witness what comes next." Claire almost smiled. Years ago, she'd helped Arthur navigate a crisis when the company's biggest advertiser pulled out mid-quarter. She'd vouched for him when the board wanted to cut ties, and now he'd returned the favour. "I back her," Arthur said. "This isn't about family drama, it's about fiduciary duty." Erin crossed a line. The room quieted. Claire placed both hands on the table. "You have a choice. Continue on the path Erin's laid out and risk regulatory collapse, or take action now and save what's left of our legacy." Silence hung heavy, like the moment before a storm, and then slowly heads began to nod. The door slammed open with a force that echoed through the glass-panelled room. Erin strode in, heels clacking like gunfire, crimson suit blazing beneath the fluorescent lights. Her eyes scanned the table, then landed on Claire, narrow and blazing. "Well," she said, arms crossed, "if this isn't the most elaborate temper tantrum I've ever seen." Claire didn't flinch. She remained seated, hands folded neatly before her. Erin turned to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologise for the disruption. My sister has been, struggling emotionally. We've all seen the signs. This is clearly an attempt to destabilise the company in the wake of a personal crisis." James Rowley frowned. Is that true, Erin? Are you denying the emails we just reviewed? I'm denying their context, Erin snapped. Preliminary discussions happen all the time. Nothing has been signed. And as CEO, I have the right to explore strategic opportunities. Claire stood slowly. Not without board approval. And certainly not while fabricating numbers to grease the wheels. Erin rolled her eyes. Oh, please, you vanished for months and now you're suddenly Joan of Arc? Claire didn't respond. She clicked the remote again. The screen changed. A video began to play. Security cam footage grainy, but clear. Erin in a private meeting room, leaning across a glass table. Across from her sat a man in a grey suit, the COO of Aurora Media Group. Their conversation wasn't recorded, but the projection of body language and hand gestures was unmistakable. Contract packets exchanged, pens uncapped, handshakes. Then a close-up of Erin's lips as she mouthed the words, "The board won't know until after." The room went dead silent. Erin's face drained of colour. Claire let the footage loop once, then paused it. This recording was provided by an employee you fired last year, she said evenly. An employee who believed the company deserved better. Erin's voice wavered. This is a violation of privacy. You have no legal right to... It's not classified, Arthur cut in calmly. The meeting was held in a publicly accessible executive lounge. No expectation of privacy applies. A low rumble of agreement circled the table. Claire took a breath and turned fully toward Erin. I built this company with you. I gave you every benefit of the doubt. But this isn't about rivalry or family anymore. This is about trust, and you violated every ounce of it. Erin looked around, seeking a lifeline. None came. Claire placed a formal letter on the table, sliding it across. You have two options, she said. Step down quietly, retain your equity, and avoid litigation. Or stay and face a shareholder lawsuit, breach of fiduciary duty claims, and a full forensic audit. Erin stared at the letter. Her jaw clenched. You think you're better than me? She hissed. No, Claire replied. I think I remembered who I was. That was enough. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Erin snatched the letter, crumpled it in her hand, and turned on her heel. She didn't speak again. The door closed behind her with a whisper, not a slam. And in her absence, the room exhaled. Chairs creaked, papers shuffled, conversations erupted. Arthur looked at Claire. That was surgical. Claire allowed herself a small nod. It wasn't triumph she felt, but clarity. And finally, the space to breathe. Claire watched the digital ink dry on the screen, her heart calm for the first time in months. With a final click, she submitted the legal forms: name reinstatement, business registration, transfer of funds. The small confirmation window blinked at her. Your filing is complete. Thank you, Ms. Monroe. Claire Monroe, the name felt like home. It had taken weeks of back and forth with attorneys, but now it was official. Her name was no longer tethered to Erin, to the Whitmore legacy, or to the company they once shared. She wasn't escaping her past. She was redefining it, brick by brick, paper by paper. She stood and walked to the window of her loft, overlooking the marina. Sunlight poured across the hardwood floor, warm and golden. Below, sailboats bobbed gently in the breeze, their sails catching wind like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Her phone buzzed. Congratulations, read the message from Rebecca, her attorney. Claire Monroe Ventures is live. Website, domain, and Ian all confirmed. You're officially in business. Claire smiled. The firm wasn't massive yet, but it was hers, a private investment group focused on early-stage startups led by women. She'd seen too many brilliant female founders ignored, underfunded, or cut off the moment they stepped out of line. Claire was done watching from the sidelines. Now she'd write the checks herself. She sat down at her new desk, sleek, minimalist, no longer buried under folders and baggage, and opened her laptop. 3 proposals waited in her inbox. One was a sustainable clothing brand based in Portland. Another, a tech startup building AI for child safety. The third was from a pair of sisters launching a mobile clinic for underserved rural communities. All brilliant, all ignored by traditional VCs. She marked all 3 as high priority and set up calls. But work wasn't the only thing that had changed. The other half of her loft, once filled with sterile corporate decor, now burst with colour. Photos tacked to corkboards, camera lenses scattered across tables, journals full of sketches and storyboards. Photography had started as an escape, a quiet way to process emotion through light and shadow. Now it had become another pillar of her new life. She'd even booked her first exhibition, a small gallery in the Arts District, showcasing portraits of women navigating transformation. The working title, Unseen No More. Her calendar chimed with a reminder, shoot at Coastal Cliffs, 3:00 p.m. Claire packed her gear into a leather backpack, laced her boots, and grabbed her keys. The coastal highway stretched before her, the Pacific glittering in the afternoon sun. She rolled down the windows and let the wind whip her hair free. This wasn't just movement, it was momentum. When she reached the cliffs, the golden hour had begun its quiet descent. Claire set up her tripod, found the frame, adjusted her focus. She waited for the light to fall just right on the rocks, the waves, the wind. Then her phone buzzed again. She almost didn't check it, but curiosity, that old companion, won out. From Erin Whitmore. Subject, coffee? The body of the email was short. Claire, I know I don't deserve your time, but I'd like to ask for it anyway. Not about the company, not about the past. Just us. 1 hour. Your call on where? Erin. Claire stared at the screen, heart a quiet thunder. She hadn't heard from Erin since the day she walked out of the boardroom with the letter crumpled in her hand. There had been no apologies, no explanations, only silence. And now this? She lowered the camera, arms folding across her chest. Part of her wanted to delete the message without a second thought. But another part, smaller, softer, was curious. What did Erin want? What did she think she still had to say? Back at the loft, Claire poured herself a glass of wine and reread the message. She didn't reply, not yet, but she didn't delete it either. The next morning she texted Rebecca. If I agreed to meet Erin, any legal risks? The reply came quickly. None, as long as you don't disclose private deals or sign anything. Bring a witness if you're concerned, or me. Claire laughed. She liked Rebecca. No nonsense, razor sharp, and always on her side. She opened her calendar and blocked an hour for Friday. Still undecided, still in control. Claire chose a small cafe tucked into a quiet street near the conservatory. It was neutral ground, far from downtown boardrooms and uptown penthouses. A place without history. She arrived early, ordered a pot of chamomile tea, and chose the table in the back. Corner seat, full view of the room, instinct still sharp. Erin walked in 7 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and the type of trench coat that screamed understated wealth. She spotted Claire, removed the glasses slowly, and approached with a practiced smile. Claire stood, out of courtesy more than warmth. Thanks for coming, Erin said, voice soft. Claire gestured to the chair across from her. Let's get to it. They sat. A long silence stretched between them. Claire watched Erin scan the room like she was still waiting for someone else to arrive. Maybe a witness. Maybe an audience. "I wasn't sure you'd respond," Erin began. "I haven't," Claire replied. "I'm just listening." Another pause. Erin smoothed her napkin into her lap. "You look good," she offered. "Different." "Freedom does that," Claire said. Erin flinched but masked it with a half smile. "You were always better at image." Claire tilted her head. "Is that what this is about?" "I didn't ask you here to fight," Erin said quickly. "I asked because there's a version of this where we don't end up hating each other." Claire set down her tea. "Is that the version where you don't sell out the company? Or where you erase me from my own legacy?" Erin's eyes sharpened. "You make it sound like I didn't build it too." "I never said that," Claire replied calmly, "but you did everything you could to pretend I wasn't there." "I had to," Erin snapped, then quickly glanced around, lowering her voice. "You don't get it. You were always the one people trusted, the one they listened to. I had to fight for every inch of respect." Claire leaned back. "So you took mine." Erin's jaw tightened. "You were always the golden one, Claire. Mum praised you even when you failed. Dad only came home on nights you had recitals. You walked into rooms and people adjusted their tone. I spent my entire life being introduced as your sister." "And now?" Claire asked. "I'm finally not someone's second thought." There it was. Claire stared at the woman across from her, not as a sister, not even as a rival, but as a mirror cracked beyond repair. The girl who once clung to her in the dark was gone. In her place was someone who had clawed so long for light that she no longer cared who burned to get it. "You didn't invite me here to make peace," Claire said. "You came to justify it." "I came to say you're not innocent," Erin replied, voice suddenly sharp. "You say I stole your place, but you never saw how high the pedestal was that you stood on. I didn't betray you. I just took back what should have been mine." Claire exhaled slowly, a calm settling over her like armour. "I spent my whole life protecting you, Erin, not competing. You were never my opponent. You were my sister." Erin looked away. Claire stood, placing money on the table for the tea. "But I see now that I was yours. Maybe you've always needed someone to beat more than someone to love." She stepped back, then paused. "There's nothing left to salvage here, and I'm not carrying this version of us into the next chapter of my life." Erin opened her mouth, but Claire shook her head. "Goodbye, Erin." She left the cafe with steady strides, the sunlight warm against her skin. There was no triumph in her chest, only a quiet, irrevocable understanding. Some ties don't unravel. They're cut clean. The gallery buzzed with quiet conversation and the clinking of wine glasses. Soft light glowed across white walls, illuminating framed portraits in clean black borders. Claire stood near the entrance, dressed in charcoal silk and low heels, calm but electric beneath her skin. It was opening night. Her first solo exhibition, what they never saw. A year ago, she'd been invisible. A name erased from boardrooms, a woman silenced mid-sentence. Now her work spoke in ways no press release could counter. The space was curated like a story. Each photo, a chapter in the lives of women who'd been broken, buried, or betrayed, and who rose anyway. One showed a woman in her 50s, staring directly into the camera, her silver hair wild in the wind. Another captured a young mother clutching her child outside a courthouse, her defiant eyes saying everything her lips couldn't. Another, a grandmother standing alone beside the ruins of a burned-down home, grief and resolve mingled in her posture. Claire had spent months finding these women, listening to them, earning their trust. They weren't victims, they were proof. She moved between guests, accepting compliments, answering questions, sipping sparkling water from a crystal tumbler. Several collectors approached her about purchasing rights. A university gallery asked to host a touring version. And tucked in the corner, a well-known critic from The Observer took notes on a leather-bound pad, pausing now and then to study the largest piece in the room. That one hung alone at the far wall. A black and white portrait titled Blood Ties. It was different from the others, not posed, not formal. It was a candid capture, a young girl in mid-laugh, arms around her older sister, both faces joyful, unaware of the camera. Claire had taken it herself decades ago with a borrowed film camera and a cheap roll of Kodak. She'd found the negative in a box during the legal dust storm of her separation from Erin. It had taken her breath away because it reminded her not of what had been lost, but of what had once been real. She printed it large, larger than logic dictated, and placed it at the climax of the exhibition. It wasn't just for the viewers, it was for herself. The critic approached. "That one," she said, gesturing toward Blood Ties. "It hits different, like a gasp after holding your breath too long." Claire nodded. "It's the only one I didn't shoot for this series." "I can feel that," the critic said. There's pain there. And hope. And a lie, maybe." Claire said nothing. The critic scribbled something in her notebook and moved on. Claire turned toward the portrait again, ready to rejoin the conversations, but then stopped. Someone stood before Blood Ties now, motionless, red coat, hair pulled back tight, hands clasped in front. Erin. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. Claire felt her breath catch, but made no move to approach, not this time. Erin studied the image like it was a riddle she couldn't solve, a truth she'd misplaced. For a moment, the woman who had burned bridges and buried names looked small, even fragile. Claire stepped back into the crowd, letting the moment stand untouched. This exhibition wasn't about forgiveness, it wasn't about revenge, it was about visibility. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, Claire didn't need to explain anything. Her work had already spoken. Claire stood at a respectful distance for a long while, letting the noise of the gallery swallow the moment. Erin hadn't moved. Her eyes remained fixed on the image, on the two girls forever frozen in time, arms wrapped around each other, laughter blooming on their faces like a summer memory. Eventually, Claire stepped forward. Her heels made no sound against the gallery floor, but something in Erin shifted. Her shoulders tensed slightly, just enough to let Claire know she had been noticed. Claire stopped beside her, hands folded in front of her. The two sisters stood side by side for the first time in what felt like lifetimes. She spoke, voice low, just above a whisper. "Do you see yourself in that photo?" Erin didn't respond. Claire didn't push. "I found it by accident," she continued. "Didn't even remember taking it at first. It was in a box marked camp stuff. Can you believe that? Buried between mosquito spray and old name tags." Erin's gaze remained forward, unmoving. Claire glanced at the image again. "We were happy, for real. No cameras, no boards, no competing, just sisters, before everything got loud." Still silence. Claire turned toward her fully now. "I hung it here because I wanted to remember that we were something once, that I didn't imagine the love I gave you, that it wasn't all shadows." Finally, Erin blinked. Her throat bobbed, and she reached up to brush at the corner of her eye. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse. "I didn't know you still had it." Claire nodded. "I didn't know I needed to." Erin sniffled quietly. "I never meant for it to get this far." Claire exhaled through her nose. But you meant for it to start. That Erin didn't deny. They stood in silence again, two women bound by blood but frayed by years of unspoken truths. The air between them pulsed, not with anger, but with something sadder, older, like dust on a forgotten shelf. Claire softened just slightly. I didn't come over to hurt you. I know, Erin whispered. I also didn't come to fix it. This time Erin looked at her. Her eyes, rimmed red, searched Claire's face, like a woman trying to recognize someone from a dream. I guess I wanted to see if there was still anything between us. Claire met her gaze evenly. There is, but it's not what it used to be. Erin nodded slowly. Her shoulders sank as if the weight of it finally settled on her chest. Claire turned back to the photo. There are wounds that heal, and then there are fractures. You can't always feel them, but they're there, quiet, permanent. Erin said nothing. Claire looked at her one last time. I hope you find peace, Erin. I really do. She didn't wait for a reply. She walked away, through the gallery crowd, past the press, the critics, the clients, past the collectors and the champagne and the curated playlists, out into the night. The air was crisp. The city hummed. Claire didn't feel triumphant. She felt whole. She had loved her sister. She had lost her. She had faced her. And now, finally, she had let her go. Some people carry your blood. Others carry your truth. They are not always the same. 6 months after her gallery show, Claire stood in front of a packed auditorium, a wireless mic clipped discreetly to her collar and the iconic red TED logo glowing behind her. Her palms were calm, her voice steady. She wasn't nervous, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she'd already faced the hardest thing a woman can face, being erased and choosing not to disappear. The audience waited, expectant, curious. She began simply. My name is Claire Monroe, she said, and for a long time I believed I had to be acknowledged to exist. That if no one said my name, if no one clapped when I entered a room, then I hadn't done anything worth remembering. A soft silence blanketed the crowd. But I've learned something since then. We don't need to be recognized to be valuable. We don't need to be celebrated to be powerful. Sometimes the most important things we do are the ones no one ever sees. She paused, letting the truth hang there. The talk was only 18 minutes long, but every second was built on years of surviving in silence. Claire spoke about Reclaimed, her photography book that had become a quiet phenomenon, shared between women in therapists' offices, passed along in book clubs, discussed in university seminars. The book held portraits of women who had been left behind by systems, by families, by lovers, by themselves, and yet in every image they stood, sometimes with grief in their eyes, sometimes with fire, always whole. Each story in Reclaimed had been paired with an essay, some written by Claire, others by the women themselves. The pages were raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. Reviewers called it a visual anthem of survival. Bookstores placed it beside bestsellers, though Claire never marketed it. It was meant to find who needed it when they were ready. But the book was just one thread. Claire Monroe Ventures had grown rapidly in the same span of time. Her firm now backed over 30 women-led businesses across 5 states, from biotech labs to food cooperatives, urban farms to educational tech platforms. She didn't just write checks, she mentored, she connected, she amplified. Her favourite founder was a 24-year-old single mom named Noelle, who had invented a water filtration system small enough to fit in a child's backpack. Claire had met her in a church basement during a women's grant program. Noelle hadn't even had a pitch deck, but her eyes had burned with that same "I have no one, so I'll be someone" fire Claire knew all too well. Now, Noelle's company was in talks with UNICEF. Claire had never been so proud. As the TED Talk drew to its final minute, Claire closed with a line that would be quoted across the internet for months. "We spend too much time asking the world to see us. But what if we started seeing ourselves first? What if we built not for applause but for impact? Because value doesn't come from visibility. It comes from voice, and we've had ours all along. A beat, then thunderous applause." Afterward, Claire stood backstage, heart racing from adrenaline but grounded in purpose. She took off the mic, exhaled deeply, and smiled when the event coordinator handed her a note from one of the other speakers. It read simply, "Thank you. I needed to hear that today. A woman who's been silent too long." Claire folded the paper and tucked it into her wallet beside an old photo of herself and Erin as children. Not everything had to be forgotten to be left behind. That night, she returned to her loft, made herself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The city buzzed below, alive and indifferent. But this time, indifference didn't scare her. She had built a life so rooted in purpose that recognition had become irrelevant. Her phone buzzed once, a group message from the founders she mentored, celebrating another funding milestone. She replied with a simple heart emoji and turned back to her tea. Claire Monroe no longer needed a seat at anyone's table. She had built her own.